Hello and welcome back to Star Wars Monthly Monday. We got a special segment this time. I've got the creator. I was trying to decide whether I should say director or editor, but I guess creator is the best way to say it. Of Star Wars Begins and Building Empire and Returning to Jedi. And all I know about you, it really is your first name is Jamie.
Yes, hello. Yeah, my first name is Jamie, second name Benning, and I put these things together.
And I just have to say, you do a great job on them. I've been enjoying these. Now, which was it? Empire that came out first that you did first?
Yeah, Building Empire. I started back in 2005, and it took me about 6 months to complete that, and it was partially embarked upon because I wanted to learn Apple Final Cut Pro software, because I work in the television industry and I was trying to, add another string to my bow. I wanted to get my teeth sunk into a project that I would be motivated to do, and I'm a huge Star Wars fan and I do love the editing process, so I put it together and released that. And then the next step was to do Returning to Jedi, which I completed in about 8 months, I think. And then the one that was left, of course, was Star Wars. So I started on Star Wars Begins about 4 or 5 years ago. But in the meantime, I'd had 2 daughters, moved house, and my career kind of took off as well a little bit. So it kind of went on the back burner for a little while. So I had a little bit of a lapse in motivation, you could say. And I finally picked that up again in the last year and got it finished and released just this February, and it's gone kind of global, really, which is weird.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because on the internet and on the YouTubes and all that stuff, I mean, I'm not sure what year it was. It was probably around 2006 or so that I started finding, little clips of Building Empire, and I'm not even sure if they were something that you put up or somebody had taken and reposted, but I eventually tracked down, it must have been your site because they were all there in sequence, and from then on I've been sort of, you sort of build a picture of who you think the person is who's building it, and it's funny.
Sure, yeah.
And, like I was saying before the interview,
you didn't expect it to be a British guy, did you?
that it wasn't as much that, because on the internet I have found in all my travels that, like, at first, being an American and being, hey, hi, I'm an American, I assume everybody else is American if they're speaking English on the internet for a while, and I've learned that's not true over the years. But no, what first started tipping me off that I was completely wrong was in our emails back and forth when we set a time today. It was, you were saying, by that time I'll have the kids put to bed. The first thing I was picturing someone maybe like college age, because I was thinking the amount of energy and time that it takes to do a project like this. It would have to be somebody, sort of maybe a film student or a media student,
Sure.
And,
yeah.
So I got that right. You must have been a media student at some point.
I was. I went to university here in the UK. Whilst I was working full time, actually, I did a part-time course, a media production course. I luckily found myself shortly after that getting a job working in live television. I do have some of the kind of discipline that's needed, but I work mostly in a live environment, whereas these projects, Star Wars Begins and the others, take a lot more consideration, and you mull them over, and you make tweaks here and there, whereas in the live stuff it's just about getting it done and getting it to air as soon as possible. But yeah, you're right in thinking that I do have a bit of a media background, but wrong in thinking that I'm a young college guy with loads of time on my hands. The thing is, I travel a lot with my job, so I'm able to work on short sections of the project whilst I'm in the air.
On a laptop or such?
Yeah, I've been using a MacBook Pro, but I also have a G5 Mac back at home, so I come back and I I reincorporate them in and continue to work on them. But it became difficult to do it on the road more and more because the thing was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, which is why I found less time to spend on it, with the kids. But when the kids have gone to bed or whatever, I can spend a half an hour on something like this. And then I am a freelance editor as well, so it means that sometimes I go through periods where I'm not working so much, so I could then concentrate a little bit more on my hobby, in making these things.
Well, it's funny. It's so humble sounding when you say, your hobby and everything like this. But my first impression when I saw this is sort of the way, if anybody who's listening hasn't seen any of these, and you could go right to YouTube and immediately start watching them. It reminded me of this DVD series of discs, the Criterion DVDs, where they would take a movie and not so much as the say optimized print or anything like that, but they would really do a lot of work to gather up the background information, and there would be a lot of the extras wouldn't just be your average the director going, oh well, this was a fun scene to film here. They would really go in depth and on their sources and make this really, they're almost like film school in a DVD package. And
well, that was kind of my intention, really. I was like you say, I was kind of a little bored of the lazy DVD extras, just as a almost like promotional material, saying, hey, my film's great. Oh, it was great to work on this great script with these great people, and it doesn't give the truth fun about the process, and because I think filmmaking, is a very difficult pursuit, and especially with a film like Star Wars, there was a lot for George Lucas to go up against, and I don't think that's ever been really portrayed in the way it should. So that's kind of what I embarked on with these projects.
Well, what I liked about it was it was like somebody took this Criterion disc and took everything on it and put it all onto the movie at once, without it being I don't know if you've ever seen there's a VHS 1 TV show here in America. I don't know if it's on anymore. It was called Pop-Up Video, and they would show videos. Yeah,
I've heard people talk about it,
and stuff would pop up. It was obnoxious. And it could have been, and I remember seeing it going, I could have really liked this because I sort of have a short attention span. I like to see how things go on behind the scene, but it was obnoxious. You managed to, perform the same function while doing it seamlessly. That's what the thing I noticed immediately was the films didn't lose their flow of watching.
Yeah, well, that was Yeah, that's very deliberate. I think like most Star Wars fans, you get used to watching them, and you get to those particular visual and sort of audio cues. You know exactly what's coming next. And the idea of these projects was to let you watch the film as you would normally watch it, so you could still see most of the things there, hear most of the audio, but occasionally jar the viewer and think into thinking, hey, what's this? I didn't expect this to come along. So be it an alternate take or a deleted scene or an outtake blooper, or some kind of text fact that you wouldn't necessarily have known yourself, because there are a lot of casual Star Wars fans out there, and I've been getting a lot of messages from people saying that my films have made them forget about the rest of Star Wars, the prequels and the Clone Wars and the books and the toys and everything, which for a lot of people has kind of destroyed the franchise, especially people who are kind of my age, between 30 and 45, who are around, at the time of initial release, and me, and and they've been kind enough to say that it's brought them back to that magical time as a kid when they first watched the film, and they obsessed over it and felt that real sense of adventure and excitement and magic, which is really nice to hear, actually.
Well, which brings me to what we always, whenever we have a guest on the show, and we're talking about Star Wars, we always ask them what their Star Wars origin story. What was it that when was the first time you saw? If it was the first time that you saw Star Wars, it was what hooked you in. And
yeah, well, I was born in '76, so I was too young to see the first film. when it first came out. But I was around, you know, for The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and of course I was surrounded by all of the action figures, and I used to collect those. And of course I played in the school playground at lunchtime at recess, you know, and pretended to be Luke Skywalker or Han Solo, or whoever it might be. And the less popular kids, you know, could be I don't know, Chewbacca and Chewbacca's brother or something. But you know, it was kind of something that was always around me. I mean, I had the books, I had the toys, and I do remember going to see The Empire Strikes Back. I think it was one of the first films I ever saw, along with, I think I saw Superman on a re-release when I was very young as well. And then one of the things that I really do remember is, for my birthday, my parents took me to London to the Dominion Theatre, which was the biggest cinema screen in the UK at that time, to see Return of the Jedi. But before we went there, they took me to Hamleys, which is a world famous toy store that's over several floors. You know, this predates Toys R Us and everything like that. It's still there today, but there was an entire floor of Star Wars toys. You know, for a kid of my age at that point, that was just the most magical thing, you know. So I've always had these really strong memories associated with, you know, a kind of more innocent time, and I think that's what Star Wars brings back for me. And then as an adult, you know, as a teenager, I rediscovered the films on VHS and on television, and you know, bought a few of the books and kind of got back into it again. But as a kid, I remember the first time it was aired on TV over here, I didn't have a VHS, VCR or Betamax. I only had an audio cassette player, so I had to go to bed one night when it was on, but I put my little audio cassette recorder up against the speaker, put a tape in and press play and record, and I used to listen to that over and over again as a kid. You know, that was like a little storybook for me, you know. So I've always had this strong connection with the films, and it's nice to come full circle as an adult and use my sort of editing knowledge to make something like this for fans like me, because I made it for people like me, you know, who you know a lot about the films, but would like to see something a little bit extra, you know,
something new. And it's still, and it's great. The people who listen to our podcast are going to be laughing as soon as you were talking about putting the tape recorder up to the TV set, because that was one of the big things that Scott and I mean, I believe I probably still have my Star Wars cassette somewhere around here, or two cassettes. It was on two 90-minute cassettes. And
yeah, I remember I had to get my parents to change the tape.
and my friend Scott had shoe boxes full of cassettes of every, you know, he would tape them all. I remember listening to there was an especially long edit of Superman that they used to show on TV, and we used to listen to his cassette of it all the time. And you know, I love talking to people our age that remember, you know, the time before the internet and before, you know, video and media being so ubiquitous, to where, you know, it was like capturing lightning. You had to be in the right place at the right time to
absolutely
to see something.
Yeah, you know, my kids now will just say, "Daddy, I want to watch, you know, whatever show it might be," and you know, 30 seconds later they can press on the YouTube link on the homepage there, and they can, you know, look on the history of YouTube that they've looked at and find that show that they want. You know, it's crazy that kids can just demand these things, but as you say, back then we had to bide our time and be ready to pounce when that moment occurred.
And that leads me to another question. Is pretty much, I would you say most of the because when I first started watching Empire, building Empire, I remember thinking, all right, this guy has taken, you know, audio tracks off the DVD extras and put them on, and then I started noticing, I'm like, I've never heard this interview before, you know, or you know, I've never heard this little bit of information before. These aren't from the usual, you know, just general resources you would normally get. So did you track most of that stuff down, I would assume, through the internet, right?
Yeah, a lot of it was. I was lucky enough to get in contact with some people on a website called originaltrilogy.com who are big fans of the original trilogy, and there was a petition set up to get the original trilogy in its original form released on DVD. And they're looking for the same to be released on Blu-ray now. But there were some people on there that, like me, had recorded things off of the TV. had, around the time of the special edition release in '97, had recorded interviews and things like that. So they were kind enough to send me some stuff. I'd also recorded some things myself from back in the day that I still had hold of, and transferred to DVD. So, you know, interviews with members of the cast and crew, because don't forget, this was shot mostly in the UK, you know, the studio stuff. So there's lots of crew members, and a lot of the cast members, I think, have, you know, kind of an affection towards the UK and towards their time working on Star Wars. So you'd hear from people like Mark Hamill. They'd come over and do, you know, a re-release premiere, or Carrie Fisher would be on a chat show, or, you know, George Lucas might appear on a AFI tribute or something like that. So there's all these little snippets everywhere all over the internet, and I felt that it could all be kind of distilled down into one piece, but give an overall picture of the film that maybe hasn't been told before.
And you certainly, and as somebody who's, I'm no stranger to video editing, you know, just the fact that you maintain the beats and the feel of the film is what is just most impressive. It's just it's awesome. It's must have been so much. There must have been so much work and toiling over this. Every time I see it, it's that double-edged sword of where I'm watching it as a fan, and I'm watching it also as somebody who's trying to think of, just like watching the movies, who's trying to think of, as a matter of fact, it sets all these things in play in my brain of, you know, I'm watching it and I'm enjoying the Star Wars-ness of it, but I'm also breaking down the movie on the Lucas level, but I'm also breaking it down on the Jamie level of having to get all this information, pour through all of it, edit it all down to what you thought was the most interesting or salient point to put in at that point, and put it all together. So it's like three monsters, you know, fighting in my head to decide who's enjoying the movie more. Which
the problem is you'll find as well. Yeah, well, thank you. That's very kind. I mean, the problem I found is that, you know, initially it's quite easy just to say, oh, that is a piece of Luke in the land speeder, that goes there, you know. Oh, this is a piece showing Biggs before he gets in his X-wing, okay, that bit goes there, you know. But after a while it builds up to this massive thing, and then you've got to kind of pick and choose on what you're going to use, you know. I'm a big fan of seeing all the behind the scenes stuff, so very rarely have I cut any of that out. What I would tend to do is maybe slow it down to make it fill up a larger space, or, you know, just to give the pace a bit more of a rhythmic nature, so that, as you say, it doesn't detract from the pace of the film. And the other problem with the audio stuff is that so many of the actors and the director and the producer say the same stuff again and again and again. In so many different interviews, you know, with different TV shows, radio shows, podcasts.
Well, you're starting to do some interviews now, so you're starting to know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm saying a lot of the same stuff.
But you're probably getting it more and more refined and condensed every time you do it. Yeah. So
absolutely. But it is difficult to pick out those bits and not to repeat. But at the same time, it's nice to hear the repetition. If it's, say, from George Lucas, it's nice to hear the repetition maybe over, you know, a decade or two, you know, because he might say something with a certain naivety as the film's being made, and then he might come full circle and talk about it 30 years later with the same words, you know, but maybe with a different inflection or something. So it's nice to have that comparison and that contrast.
Well, I'm hoping all this attention, I'm hoping this gets George Lucas's attention if it hasn't already, because either he should hire you, or he should at least pay attention, or not even George Lucas, but people who put out DVDs who really care about the movie should pay attention to this, because this is the kind of thing that I think people want as a DVD extra. I think was part of your motivation sort of to illustrate, like, this is how I would do a DVD extra, you know?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think I've said before, and you know, I've said in some of the other interviews that I've done, that I've just got a little bit tired of the kind of press junket, you know, DVD extra. And I think one of the things that inspired me to do this was on the Back to the Future DVD box set, there was a little subtitle track you could put up, which would have little pop-up facts now and again. You know, it might talk about the DeLorean and when it was made and how many were made and why they chose to use it or that or something. Or, you know, it might be a reference to a scene, might have a reference to another film of the director's favorite or something, you know. And it was really interesting to see those things come up. And I thought, you know what, this could be wound up a little bit more. This could be pushed a little bit further. Why should a commentary just be audio or just be text or just be video in a behind the scenes documentary? Why can't it be all three of those things, you know? So it was just an experiment really to see if it worked. And it is a very fragmented piece when you look at it, but somehow with the start and the finish, they kind of bookend something that's a little bit more than the elements that make it up, you know. So that was my intention really, and I haven't had any attention from Lucasfilm yet, and it's a difficult thing for them, because if they do shut me down, as it were, they would be doing their fans a disservice in a way, because, you know, I've had lots of hits, a lot of people seem interested in this, it seems to have struck a chord with people.
Right.
Also, if they acknowledged it and maybe praised it, they're in a difficult position with regards to copyright. So I don't think I'm going to get official feedback from them. You know, I have heard from somebody else that says that this is my stuff is currently going around Industrial Light and Magic.
Oh, good. Yeah, you see, and in America we love a good storyline, and what a great storyline it would be of, like, this guy was a fan, he put the movies together, and you know, I can almost hear George Lucas's voice going, well, you know, then we decided, you know, we should hire him, and you know, we brought him over to the ranch, took him through the archives, you know.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the dream, you know.
That would be awesome.
Jamie, here's the key to the archives. Off you go, see what you can make out of that. Because the guys at ILM, apparently, a couple of them actually worked on the films themselves, and they said that they've been trawling through their archives, but the stuff they've put together for the Blu-rays doesn't go into as much detail as my stuff, and they don't think they could because they've not been given the time to do so. But you know, who knows, maybe one day the Ultra HD release, they may let me go wild in the archives.
No, but also at the same point, say if they had been like, all right, you know, when say after Building Empire, they said, okay, you know, we're gonna have you do the other two movies, I don't think you would have gotten this. You would have been, maybe, not that your movies have anything that maybe, say, you know, they're like the Star Wars that George Lucas doesn't want you to see or anything like that, but they also have a pretty, and I didn't notice this till the Star Wars one, and it was maybe because I had just watched have you ever heard of Mr. Plinkett, the Red Letter Media guy?
Absolutely.
I just watched one of his, and he, you know, did this running montage of George Lucas sitting down with his cup of coffee, you know, in front of a green screen.
It's very good.
And then the next day, literally, I was watching, you know, I was sort of waiting for all the parts of the Star Wars films to build up so I could watch them in a row, and I started watching it, and I was noticing, man, he's not having a good time in this movie. And then when I went back and watched Empire, and it was pretty much whenever you saw George Lucas on the set, the guy looked like he was having a horrible time, which is pretty much mostly the job of a director, especially if you're doing something as insanely, you know, involved as a Star Wars movie. But yeah, and in the Star Wars one, yeah, you really see, I mean, literally there's that scene where, and this was in the documentary that they put on the DVDs, where he keeps reshooting them running out of the doorway towards the Falcon on the Death Star. And you know, he's like, we're gonna do it again, and you can see the actors are just like on him. They're just like, what George? And he's like, oh.
Yeah, they're really pushing it with him, aren't they? You know, and you can see he looks tired, and you know, he had a director of photography, Gil Taylor, who didn't like him and he didn't get on with. He had a British crew that wanted to break for tea and wouldn't give him that extra 10 or 15 minutes he needed at the end of the day, overtime, because of the union rules, you know. And they all thought they were working on some, you know, crappy TV
Doctor Who.
TV sci-fi.
Yeah,
Doctor Who, and a lot of people. But then you look at some of the stuff I've put in Star Wars Begins, you can see why they thought that. You know, with Dave Prowse doing his lines with a West Country accent, and Paul Blake doing his lines as Greedo. You know, it does look like a low budget TV piece, but you know, it just shows what a fantastic job they did in post production with the sound and the music and everything else.
And when I watch it, I watch it all the way through, and Star Wars really was the only one that was sort of like this. But as you watch them putting together Star Wars, and you hear this, you know, the shots without the special effects and the sound put together and everything, it could have gone, and especially the music, without the music, it could have gone either way. It could have been really bad. And you know, all the I mean, right up until probably the very end of editing it and putting it together, if that, you know, mix of ingredients hadn't been done just right, it could have been a kind of a clunker, you know.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, a lot of it's down to timing with these things, isn't it? You know, and just the stars were crossed at the right point at the right time, I guess. You know, John Williams was available to do it, and obviously his music had a huge emotional impact on the film. You know, George was up against all these problems and managed to squeeze out a kind of a version of the film that he wanted, but luckily it was better than we could have imagined at the time. You know, it would be interesting, wouldn't it, if, you know, George was in the position he's in now, where he could do exactly what he wanted. I wonder what films would appear with regards to the original trilogy now, you know, if they've not been made already.
Yeah.
I think I don't think we would have loved them quite as much. I think the prequels,
we might
you know,
not have had the prequels.
Like well, who knows? But you know, I can kind of see why he would want to sit in a chair and point at a green screen and decide to correct things. You know, in a nice dark room without any people. You know, taking the Mickey out of him. You know, because those actors did seem to push it a little bit with him, didn't they?
You could, yeah. Well, you could almost see that he didn't have total control over his set, and you could almost see Lucasfilm Ranch as being a reaction to all that, just being like, all right, I got the money, I'm building it all up myself. I'll have my own crew, and they'll work till 4 a.m. if they have to. And
I always get the impression that with the original films, you know, he had people like Gary Kurtz, and he had his wife Marcia Lucas, you know, who would question his decisions and advise him on things. And I got the impression with the prequels, watching some of the making of documentaries on those, it's just people standing around waiting to have their designs approved by George.
I know.
You know, with a little tick stamp or an OK stamp or something, you know, and they're all standing there nervously waiting for their big moment when George approves their work. You know, back in the day, he would have had people, you know, he had his contemporaries saying things like, that's the entry of your villain. Can you not do any better than that? You know, and made him kind of up his game. And you know, thank goodness that those other elements did arrive in the shape
Harrison
of
Ford
John Williams and
calling him to task on his dialogue, and Alec Guinness,
absolutely, you
know, rewriting the dialogue. So, but I always wonder about that. I always wonder if in the prequels, if people had stepped up and said, I don't know if Yippie's the best idea in the world. If I don't know George Lucas at all. I have no idea. You know, would he have gone into some egomaniac? Don't tell me what my Darth Vader can say. You know, I wonder a lot of that, if it gets put on George Lucas and it's more of just the people around him not being non-confrontative, but.
I mean, you got the guy's carrying a huge weight around, you know, on his shoulders with the Star Wars franchise. I mean, I read just this week that the toys alone made $500 million in 2010.
It's like when your favorite band becomes famous. You know, you're seeing your band in the clubs, and it's great, and you know, you get to shake their hand after the show, and then all of a sudden they're playing stadiums. And then the unwashed masses like him, not just your little group of people, and everybody in the world likes him. And that band, and all of a sudden, has to please everybody instead of just you know, the people who like them for one reason or another. So he's in that position. So he's gotta, you know, he's doing that, trying to make everybody happy and sort of succeeding at it. And basically, I don't begrudge him that much, because I think he's making, from what I've seen of kids watching any Star Wars, whether it be the prequels, the original, or say the TV show, the Clone Wars TV show, they love it all. No matter what.
Yeah, well, I'm no Lucas hater or anything, and I think the guy's doing the best he can with the ability he's got. It just so happened, as I said, that I think the first three just had the right combination of everything, and unfortunately the prequels for me didn't. But there are some people that prefer the prequels. I'm not about to say that George Lucas raped my childhood or whatever the line is that people quote online, but I think each to their own. But I see them as two very separate things: the original trilogy and the prequels, and that's fair enough.
We'll see 15 or 20 years down the line when the people who were 5 years old when they saw episode 1 grow up, and how they remember it and all that. And once it's passed out, once anybody who's like, they raped my childhood, those people will be in the retirement home at that point. They can just write it off to senility or old person grumpiness. But yeah, as long as it's still making kids happy and it hasn't turned into some weird like propaganda machine or something like that, I'm just happy that it can still exist and be done. Yeah,
exactly.
I'm
and inspire people to do things,
Yeah, and what the problems aside with the trilogy, I did notice it getting, each movie sort of getting improved and being, tinkered with by, I still hold Lucas as a valid filmmaker. I'm still waiting for him to do some goofy underground film, with that's actor based or something, some low budget, we'll just take the cameras and we'll go direct it like the Return of the Secaucus 7 or something. That would finally prove it to me that I still look at him as an independent filmmaker, as an maybe not underground but independent. So
no, it's an amazing achievement that he's managed to get himself into that position. I just think that it's a shame that he didn't do what he intended to do, which was to make these very interesting, independent, quirky films. He was the sort of quirky one at film college by the sounds of things, and he never really got around to doing that. I think everybody thought that after Return of the Jedi was finished, he would have made enough money to go and do what he wants to do, and he obviously spent a lot of time and money investing in, computer games and into education and things like that. And special effects, of course, that he kind of dropped the ball a little bit. And it's a shame that we never actually got to see what he was capable of, outside the Star Wars franchise. Maybe we will.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I was going to say, he's still alive, so...
yeah.
He's still drawing breath, so it's still possible. But, well, we're hitting about the half-hour mark. I don't want to take up any more of your valuable time. I was going to say valuable editing time, but you're a family man, so it's valuable family time.
No, it's funny, talking about the weight on George Lucas's shoulders. I'm feeling a little bit of weight myself, because people are saying, right, what's this guy going to do next? Is it going to be Back to the Future or Jaws or Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Oh my God!
I think
I never even thought
the
of
answer to that. Yeah, well,
how hard would one of those ones be, though? I mean, there's Star Wars stuff. Where's the group of people who are archiving all the Jaws material? I don't know. If it's out there.
I don't think there's the wealth of material. No, I don't think there is. And I think it would just probably be a quick rehash of all the, the 5 documentaries that have been made about Indiana Jones, or the 3 that have been made about Jaws, or
Indiana
just
Jones.
Ripping the extras off of the...
Yeah, there might be enough stuff for Raiders stuff out there.
Yeah, I think Raiders is probably the most likely. But to be honest, I just want to have a little bit of a rest from this, see if it takes me somewhere sort of professionally. And, I do have an intention one day to make a proper documentary about my grandfather's experiences in World War II. He was involved with the Russian minesweepers and crossed the Arctic Circle.
Wow.
And saved the crew of a ship that had millions of pounds worth of gold on it, and and his captain went against direct orders and all that kind of stuff. So there's a story there to be told for sure, because it's not really been told pictorially before. But I'm just trying to use some of the...
Still alive?
No, he died 2 years ago, and it spurred me on even more, I think, to kind of, get his story, not just his story, but his involvement in that wider picture, I'm trying to use a bit of the motivation and inertia that Star Wars Begins success has given me to make a few inroads into doing that. So I'm actually flying to the Middle East tomorrow to do some sporting event work, and I'm taking a few books with me regarding the subject. So I'm trying to swat up a little bit to see if it's even possible. It's not a story that I'm completely familiar with, and there is going to be a lot of research involved, but I think it will be interesting to see if I could pull it off, and it's going to be a challenge for me.
Have you ever have you done interviews with him before? Do you have like recorded interviews and stuff like that?
I don't, unfortunately. Unfortunately, his experiences were pretty harrowing, and he found it very difficult to talk about in his later years, and he ended up having sort of nightmares about it, having suppressed it for so many years, as so many people did of that generation. But I've been in contact with some people online that are not only enthusiasts but had relatives, and there's one guy who's given me his father's diary to read.
Wow.
And there's some amazing stuff, and there are a few books about the subject as well, where these people talk about not being able to sleep for months on end because of the ice crashing against the bow of the ship. And they had to continually break ice off of the top of the ship to keep the thing moving, and all the time there's the threat of the German U-boats and the mines in the water, So it's going to be interesting to see if I go down the road of maybe a documentary, or maybe even trying to write a script. I don't know. It's something that I've not really attempted before, but it's something I've always kind of wanted to do. And the more people I talk about it, the more people seem to think that there's something there, So maybe I will. But I'm going to have a little rest first.
Yeah, let it gel, and I mean, if Lucas does take you to the archives, hey, that would definitely point the way towards maybe a Raiders of the Lost Ark, because I'm sure they've got some stuff sitting around there. But yeah, I mean, if these 3 movies were all that you've ever done, you've done a great service to the nerd world.
Thank you.
And,
it was, it's my intention to do something for a small group of people, and I didn't realize there'd be this many people into it. I actually sort of came out as a big Star Wars geek and the creator of these things to my Facebook friends the other day, most of whom had no idea, and some of them had already seen my work, some of them had no idea at all and said, how did you find the time to do this, But everyone's been very supportive. I think I don't think I've had a negative comment yet, really. So that's nice.
Well, it's one of those things where the enthusiasm that you had for the project comes through on the project. It would be very hard to be down on it. When you watch it, it's very energizing to watch. It's done with respect and love to the original stuff, and it comes at it at times at angles that myself feeling that I'm like the jaded Star Wars fan, nobody's gonna tell me anything new about Star Wars. The only way I'm gonna know is if I could be a fly, or maybe better yet, a ladybug on the wall at Tunisia or whatever. But
yeah, sure.
But you proved me wrong, like, over and over and over again. So
good.
I love being proved wrong. Yeah, it's great.
Good. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I hope your listeners get the time to watch it. I keep hearing from people that say, "Oh, I just meant to watch, a 1-minute snippet on YouTube, and I've been awake for the last 3 hours watching
the whole thing."
Watching the whole thing, yeah. So, so that's nice to hear.
Well, to our listeners, I'm gonna cut and paste I'll cut and paste the first part to each movie up on our forum page, so you can go right there, and that'll get you started right off.
These are non-profit projects. I've spent my own money on these, and I've turned down all offers of money for them. I mean, if work does arise off the back of it for me, then I guess I am profiting, but at least I'm not directly making money out of somebody's work.
Yeah, but it's more profiting.
But I'm sure a BitTorrent will arrive.
It's more for profiting off hard work than profiting off, say, the back of somebody else, as far as...
Yeah, sure. And let's face it, George's profits drawn from Star Wars profited off the back of Kurosawa's work and Joseph Campbell's work. So everything
the nature
is
of
in
art.
a big mixing pot. it's what you make of it, you know. So, and I hope it does inspire people to do their own projects like this. You know, I had a friend of mine that I work with contact me last night and say, you know, you've inspired. I'm not really into this stuff, but you've inspired me to get off my lazy backside and, you know, do something myself as well. You know, so if it can do that, then all well and good.
My fan edit, someday project is I want to do the remake of King Kong. I want to get that down to a lean, mean. Oh, probably under an hour and a half. I don't know how long the original King Kong was. Probably about 80 minutes or so. I want it to sort of run. I want to edit it sort of almost parallel to the original. You know, follow the rhythm of the original King Kong, and because I remember seeing it going, there could have been a really muscular short movie.
Yeah, well, it's the thing I do now. Whenever I watch a film that I'm not really enjoying, I start picking it to pieces and saying, you know, thinking, well, that bit could go. That when I saw Indiana Jones 4, you know, I thought, wow, I'm not really into this, but I'm sure that bit could be snipped out and I'd like it more, you know. And I actually did an edit of The Phantom Menace before I did Building Empire. I didn't do it in any decent enough quality to release online or anything, but it ended up being like 62 minutes or something. So
I have a friend who did the Batman and was it Batman and Robin or Batman Forever? The really terrible one with Schwarzenegger in it.
Yeah.
And he got that down to about 62 minutes, and it was an okay movie. It was kind of an okay campy movie instead of this sort of tooth-pulling experience. It was...
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it, that films have got this kind of default length. You know, they can't go over, they can't go under by any huge amount. And, you know, you have people filling time just to get to that duration. And then you have people, you know, taking things out that should be in there as well. And, you know, film should be the length it should be. You know, my films are longer than the Star Wars films are. I think this one's 2 hours 18 minutes. Star Wars Begins, you know, which is longer than the film quite considerably. But I didn't want to leave anything out. I didn't want to leave any of those, you know, those juicy bits of information or behind the scenes footage out. So
well, I think
it ends up being what it is.
I think a lot of times it also points to, a lot of times when you see a film in the theater, I think a lot of people assume that what you see there has been, you know, and sometimes it has been agonized over and fine-tuned perfectly in the editing room. Maybe if you're seeing, you know, especially if you're seeing, say, something like Scorsese or Coppola, you know, where but a lot of times, you know, they were sort of fiddling with that movie right up until the end and hurrying, you know, and maybe hadn't completely done everything that they wanted to do to it before it came out. You know, it's the economic nature of the whole thing.
Well, I would have liked to have done a bit more work on this, but it kind of been hanging over me for so many years. I just had to get the thing done and out of the way and move on to the next thing. You know, I didn't know it was going to be this popular. You know, as I said, if it had been, I think I would have made it a little bit more polished, maybe, but maybe invested some more money in some software and hardware to do so. But, you know, again, it's a product of the circumstances of the time, and it's out there now. And, you know, with all its mistakes and what have you.
Warts
so
and all.
Yeah,
you know, you're the one who sees the warts, though. You know, everybody. I'm also a musician, and I can't tell you how many times I've been on stage with my band, and we've come off wanting to put a bullet into our brain, going, "Oh my God, can you believe we just did that?" And people and nobody noticed. You know, nobody had any idea because they didn't know what our original intention was. But they work for me, and I can't wait. To. I've been sort of selfishly sitting on telling our listener, you know, gushing to our listeners about this till after we did the interview, so then I could take the opportunity to go and look, and here he is talking to us.
Well, you were the first people to contact me with regards to an interview, which was nice. So,
good. Thanks. Now it's on record. Haha.
And you are the last one I'm doing for this period of time. So I did one a couple of nights ago, and I was hopefully doing one last night, but I didn't make it in the end. I had some real life going on. So So yeah, this is the longest interview as well. So this could be the definitive interview.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear, or at least, oh, you know what? Right now we're putting the stamp on it. The definitive interview. That's what I'm going to title it.
You need a jingle for that.
I will have one by the end of the day. Well, thanks again for being on. I'd like to keep in contact with you because we like to have people just come on our show and talk Star Wars. You know, so
sure, that'd be good. Yeah.
If you ever feel like geeking out, you know, without an agenda, for that. Just we talk a lot. We're right now we cover the Star Wars comics that Marvel did, and we talk about the Clone Wars cartoons a lot. But we generally, a lot of times, we like to just break down and talk about Star Wars or how Star Wars is affecting geek stuff. So you know,
well, I'll tell you what. I'll make you a promise then. I'll make you a promise. I'll come back and talk to you when the Blu-ray release comes out for sure.
Excellent.
Because there'll be some stuff on there that will be a surprise to me probably. So yeah, I'll come back and we'll have a chat about that release.
All right. Yeah, that's cool. We'll go over that a little bit. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And
you're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
And I will talk to you soon. And
cool. And do mention that people can follow me on Twitter. It's at Jamie SWB, and so I'll be posting things on there with regards to the creation of the film. I'll always put links up to the interviews I've done, including yours, and you know, you can keep track of what's coming next, because you never know. There might be a development down the line somewhere. Yep,
I'll link you and I'll link you up to his YouTube page, and you can go and subscribe. And every time you watch a segment, give it the thumbs up and leave a comment saying cool. This is awesome.
Yeah, please do. All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.